Wait.
Le tapo inga i le tua. O ia o te tonu i la mātou upu e te longo atu. O whalia i a te ai e a ao lini. Tupu ai o ia e peo se tātupu i ona luma. E peo po ngai le muna mati. E le au le lei pe la le lei o ia. A tātou wawa ai i a te ia e le aisu na mata o fie. Ina ia tātou mana nao ai i a te ia. O ino sia ma tu lafo ina o ia e tangata. O le tangata whanau noa o masani fui ma le tingā. Pei se iwa alo ese mata i a te ia. O ino sia o ia. Ma o tātou le mana tua lava o ia. Surely he has borne our infirmities and carried our diseases. Yet we accounted him stricken, struck down by God and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the punishment that made us whole, and by his bruises we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have all turned to our own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By a perversion of justice he was taken away. Who could have imagined his future? For he was cut off from the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. They made his grave with the wicked, and his tomb with the rich, although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth. Let us pray. Whawhitai le ringie, ono le nei awhiawhi manu noa. Wo mai e lau whanau, lo nuhu, lau e kalesia, ma le au whatutua. Se iu mātou mana tua, le toi pō lau whio, i le laurangi. Ma se whawhangu fo i o mātou toi pō a sao. O le mātou talo le ringie, whesoso ni mai lo ngā rupaia. Ia maua e mātou le whamawhan whanama. O wā o mele nāna mātou lo maia. Loving God, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and remember your last day on earth. We thank you for the story that we're part of and the opportunity that when we are bold enough and that we're courageous enough, we too can participate in the narrative that is yours. As we continue to live our lives in days to come, and months to come, and years to come, until we meet you in that eternity that is beyond. Would you come and be with us? In your name we pray. Amen. La tato amata mesa minga e pese usami ele. Kierstynne. le fionga le tua tatou Fitā e Maria Ioane o tāpo sutonu Fitā amata mai le fuiupuinua. Our reading is taken from the book of John, chapter 13. I'll be reading starting with verse 2 in Samoan. O whaile tani suanga, au utue ti Apollo e le loto Iuta le Sekara le atari o Simona, e whalata i ate ia. Si la fia Yesu o tuina mai e tama me o malava i ona ao. O maliu mai foi o ia mai le tua, le atu e maliu o tu foi o ia i le tua. Na tu leo o ia i luma o whaile tani suanga o tu ese o na ofu. Tango foi le ia soloi, o fusi i ate ia. O le lingi le e ia o le vai le ipu e muluai. O mulumulu i vai o miso. Ma soloi ai le solo o ia fusi ai. No o tu leo o ia i a Simona Petero, o whamai o ia i ate ia, le li ia. E te mulumu e o vai. O tali atu Yesu i ate ia, o le mea o te whaia e te leino nei, a muli ane e te iloa. O whamai Petero i ate ia, e te le mulu lava o vai o i whakavau. O tali atu Yesu i ate ia, a whai o te le mulu i ate oe, e le aiso tofu fatasi maa. Whapea mai leo Simona Petero i ate ia, leli ie. Awa lavana o vai o lima fo'i atoa malo ulu. Whapea atu leo Yesu i ate ia. Le o ta ele e tau o na vai, ai mamau mai. Ai le au maa o na mulu. Uma o na mulu ina e su o lato vai, O tanga fo i ona ofu ma tu te oto. Na whapea atu mea o ia i ate ngātou. O oto i loa ere leo o whaia i ate oto. Tau te te ua mai alu o le ao ma le li. O le leifot la o tō e whemaina. O wā o au lava lea. O le nei a whai o au le li i ma le ao. O mulu ina o tō wai. O te tau ina o tō whemulu wai o tō wai. Ia whakamuia te mai le tu ala tātou whetau. Ma whakamulongo i o mai langa whio mo pa ia. Tumu watu pe a te ia o ni lava mi ima. E ale tu lava. A God on his knees. There are some people who pride themselves on being able to get motivated by tough situations. They're the tough types. You can hear it in their voices. Pastor, I work better under pressure. Some of my friends would say, bring it on, Rev. There are college students who take courses because they heard that the professor is a tough grader and that he hasn't given an A in quite a while. There are people like that amongst us. They thrive on chaos and pressure. So when we arrive at the biblical text today, the story that I read in Samoan, about Jesus washing his disciples' feet, their approach is this. Give me the hardest part of the story. Give me the baddest part of the story so I can live that out. Give me the toughest thing there is about the story so I can challenge it and overcome it. And so they read the story, and when they read the story, sure enough, they find a tough part of the narrative. In the story after Jesus washes his disciples' feet, in verse 14, Jesus said, so if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. There it is. The tough folks would say, that's the toughest part of the story. Jesus' demand for lowly foot-washing services. And that for the tough types, they gravitate towards that stuff. They relish the challenge. They know what foot washing is about. They know what it means. It's humble service. It's service to the needy. It's service to the people in the name of Christ. They get it. It manifests itself in things like cleaning the church kitchen, passing out food, serving Thanksgiving meals. It's about loving the difficult people to love. It's about seeing the worst in others and still have compassion. It's the grunt work of ministry. But the irony is, that's not the hardest part of the story. Not by a long shot. The toughest word in the story is not about washing someone's feet. It's not about Jesus washing someone's feet and then asking them to wash their neighbor's feet. That's not the hardest part of the story. That's doable. Even the tough ones can do it. But the hardest word in the story is that before they do anything, the disciples would have to sit still, they would have to be quiet, and allow Jesus to wash their feet. That's the hardest part. It's sitting still, being in this awkward position, and allowing someone else to wash your feet. Notice what Peter said. When Jesus got to Peter, Peter said, "No, Jesus, you'll never wash my feet." Peter was voicing the hardest part of the story, the hard part of the work. The hardest part is just being vulnerable in the face of self-sufficiency. It's this idea that I don't need help, that I'm okay, that my family's okay, that we're all okay. It's this idea that I will not allow my God to get on his knees and wash my feet. It's blasphemy. It's sacrilegious. It's not kosher. But then Jesus said to Peter, "Peter, unless I wash you, you will have no share with me. Unless you voluntarily receive from me, you will not have it to give." In other words, without receiving this ministry from Jesus, we cannot be discipled. Lacking his grace, apart from his service, without this act of self-sacrifice, we have nothing. Absolutely nothing to give. And this is particularly bad news for the tough part of us. Everyone has a little bit of this, the self-reliant part. This is the tough news about it. The resourceful part, the creative part of who we are. The hardest word in the story is not that we have a demanding task of ministry to do, but the hardest word is that we cannot do it without Jesus. We cannot do it with our own strength. And unless we allow Jesus to give it to us, we will not be able to have it so we can share it. There's a homeless person that I got to know over the years. He goes by the name Cowboy. Our relationship started when we were serving daily meals here at the basement. He was one of many that came to Second Samoan for a meal. And over the years, our relationship has grown. And I share a meal with him from time to time. But reflecting on my relationship with the Cowboy, it wasn't until I allowed him to contribute to my ministry, to what I was about in the world, that I was able to contribute to his life. Prior to allowing for that, it was just another act of kindness for me. Another part of the ministry that I signed up for. But when I started to make time and allow Cowboy to share his heart with me, allow him to contribute to my ministry, when I sat down with him and started to spend time getting his story, getting to know him better, his fears, his aspirations, finding out what his real name is. When I started to see his contribution to my ministry, then for the very first time, I became compassionate. And I was able to contribute to his life, in addition to the meals we were serving. See, unless you allow compassion to grow in you cannot give compassion. Unless you have it, you cannot give it. You can't give something that you don't first have. You can't wash other people's feet until you've allowed your feet to be washed. You cannot love unless you are first loved. In the story of the Good Samaritan, and the lawyer who asked Jesus, "And just who is my neighbor?" You remember the story. When Jesus started to tell this story to the young lawyer, the lawyer began to identify with the anonymous man that went down that Jericho road. You see, everyone has made that journey. This lawyer has made that journey. So now he's beginning to make that journey in his imagination as Jesus tells the story. It's a dangerous journey. And sure enough, the traveler was mugged, discarded in the gutter, left for dead. In his imagination, the lawyer watches from the ditch as a priest, and then after that, a Levite happened by and they went a different route, so they don't get to engage him. But finally, a Samaritan came along. And just like Peter, when Jesus reached out to wash his feet, the lawyer said to himself, "I don't want to be touched by a Samaritan. I don't want to receive charity from someone I don't like, I don't get along with. I don't want to have anything to do with those people." But the Samaritan, the foreigner, the stranger stopped, dressed the injured man's wounds, took him to an inn, saw that he was cared for. Then Jesus asked the question, who turned out to be the neighbor? In other words, you were in that ditch. How did you feel? And in your time of need, who proved to be a neighbor to you? And the attorney said, it was the one who showed me mercy. It was the one that actually helped me. That's who my neighbor turned out to be. See, the neighbor is anyone that's in need. It's not just people that we share theology with. It's not the people that we share the same culture with. It's anyone in need. That's what a neighbor is. And in a weird, convoluted way, it's also anyone who is willing to be helped. Anyone who is humble enough to receive service. Someone who is open to see what God is trying to do. This was the last night of Jesus' life we're commemorating tonight. He's going to be crucified tomorrow. And in this event, before the Last Supper, the foot washing event, who do you think God is in the picture? Is it the one on his knees doing the washing? Or the one whose feet are being washed? Verse 14, Jesus says, "So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet." You see, for us Christians, this is just an annual reminder that we have a faith that's 2,000 years old. We have a faith in a narrative that's time-tested. For Christians, these are just pearls that we take for granted very often. But for those who don't share our tradition, those who may be searching, those who may be looking at this for the first time, Consider that you could be that traveler that was mugged on the road to Jericho. That you have reasons to be bitter about life, to be bitter about God, to be angry at the church and about the state of being. Or perhaps your lot could be better. Perhaps you aspire to greater things. May I suggest that unless you receive it, it's not yours to have or to give. Sociologists have known this for a while, that people make everyday ethical decisions. And many people perform deeds of compassion, service, and mercy because at some point in their past, someone acted with compassion toward them. During the COVID-19 crisis, I read many stories of people helping others. They must have been shown compassion before, but there are many more that don't feel the same. And our lesson tonight is much more than just helping others, as hard as that is. Let me just say that wherever you are in life's journey, you can be much more. As long as you're here on this earth, hearing my voice, you can be much more than who you are today, in all of your multiplicity. And it's not a finger wagging, it's not a judgmental proposition. It's not like there's something wrong with you, no. But it's a call to adventure. It's allowing yourselves to be helped. It's allowing someone else to wash your feet, to permit others to help you to the next level. Adults struggle with that. Children get it. Tony Robbins tells the story about one Thanksgiving when he was growing up and their family was poor. One Thanksgiving, the stranger happened to their house with a box of food. He was a young boy, he was very excited. But his dad wouldn't have it. His dad was too proud. He told the stranger, "Take your box with you and go back. We don't need your pity. We're doing okay." Tony Robbins said the volunteer insisted. He was happy for that. The volunteer said, "Look, it's not for you. It's for the boy." This single event made such an impact on Tony Robbins. This event distinguished what it means to be compassionate for a young boy. And because that was done to him by a total stranger on a Thanksgiving day, a box of food, every year Tony Robbins put together the Basket Brigade in our community. And for those who know, we have been recipients of that generosity, hoping that one day we will get to return the favor. Because they have received compassion, they can now afford to give compassion. Receiving grace enabled him to give grace. "Unless I wash you," Jesus said, "you have no share with me." I would like to ask 2 volunteers to come here and allow me to wash your feet. tātou whai o ne sauni ngai le. Pesu sauni au for pesa.
Fitā
whai o te reo mulu ia te oe. E le iso tofi whatasi nā. Le te tea pe te uru o whaandeo ai isi atu maruma o le tangata. O le te tea awai le te tau ana mulu e seri, vai o miso. O le te tea awai le te tau ana whapalapalao na matai. O le te tea awai o lana whaawalo e ave i lona alii. Ai muli a te ia. Mea naina wo atu leli i ape te ue mulu ona mai. E le inofo le leile nei manatu i a te ia. Me pe te ue ia Yesu e te le mulu lava o vae se le o le whakavau. Pe lava le tala i a Ioane le papatiso ina o maliu atu Yesu e papatiso ina. Mai Ioane e ao ina e papatiso ina mai o ao. A e maliu mai ea oe i atea. E le teimi e whaave lave e le whaalo e le whina ngalo le atua. Ni a whaale liki i a pete. A whai o te le mulu i atea. E le aiso tofi whatasi ngā. A tongu e whai mai nisi tangata. Le mea whengatā o le ngā ruenga o le mulu o vae. Whengatā le ola tautua. Whengatā le ofo o lai nātu. A mo tātou lawa Kierstynne. O le mea whengatā atu. O lo tātou whatangaina lea o le muluina o tātou vae. Whengatā atu lo loto maua lalo. Loto malo talia o le soani mai nisi. Ai se a wai whengatau na tātou whate atu o vai, o mativa, o le mawhaia se mea. O si lingalo malosi. Le mele na te te ai pe teru i leli. Mele na te te ai o ia mulu ina o na vai e Yesu. A ole mea alofa sini lea. O le inati sini lea na oto e le li i lona toe pō i le lalo. O le whaau pe ngaina lea le li i ona soko o le ngā ruenga. Le opo moni lava le nei e te tauna matuata lia. E te le mawhai o na tuina atu se mea e leo i ate oe. E le mawhai o na e muluina vai o nisi. Se vanga nā o mua o na muluina o vai. Manatu lau pe te ue me whai e ia o na whai o ngā ruenga i lona malosi, lona ata mai. A whitalenga le ni, a whai o te le mulu i ate ue. E le aiso tofi whatasi mā. A whai a te le ta lia ina mai. E le ma whai foi o na e ofo i nātu. Le nei loto le aso maliu o lo tātou whamanatuina ai le maliu o lo tātou li. Tangata le isa nā masala. Tangata na tuka i seina e te taki o le loto ma le malo. E na ngālu mulu i le sātau o aisea. Awa sa maua mai e ia mai lona tama. Le alofa i sini, alofa o malawa. O le ofo i nā atu lea ele atua. O lona ola e suyaki tātou. E le malamalama tamiti le oti o seisi e pele i ai tātou. Ai mo tātou ua tofo i le maliu o nisi o tangata e pele. Ti ngā le aso maliu o le lu. Tua whamanatu mai ai teimi fo ina tātou whanoa noa ai ma tātou pōpua ngai. Ina ua tō e sea nisi e pele i ai tātou. E leo le iunga le nā o tawa. E nā una malo lo nei. Au lo iai le e seta o whatalitani mai mo i tātou. O whitalai Iesu a whai o te le mulu i ate koe. E le aiso tofu whatasi mai. E la whangata mai i le tātou sani. O le apemo i a tātou whailoa i la sae seta.
Thank you.